President Cyril Ramaphosa will deliver the keynote address at the second presidential summit on gender-based violence and femicide in Midrand today. Top of the agenda is progress on the work done or undertaken since the first summit back in 2018. Other topics on the program include challenges and national strategic measures to overcome violence. The two-day event aims to uphold accountability and accelerate efforts to end what the president describes as a second pandemic in South Africa. Someone else with a keen interest on these issues is Brenda, Madumise-Pajibo, Director at Vows for Africa. A very good afternoon to you, ma'am. Thankful for your time. In the last few moments before you broke for lunch at the summit, there appeared to be some disagreement about the direction of the summit. What exactly is going on?
Good afternoon. There was a bit of disruptions, but I mean, I think it's expected when you have when you are addressing issues like gender-based violence and femicide, and for people who have been doing the work on the ground and not receiving the responses that they wish to receive from those who are in power and who've got the authority and the power to make a difference in people's lives. So I'm not worried about that disruption. It was necessary, but now we are back on track. We'll hear what the president has to say on accountability, what he has achieved, and you would have heard from the participants and the delegates. The pertinent question asked by one of the delegates was, when you opened this summit, there was a collage of the women who died at the hands of their spouses and partners, the women who have been killed, and it tells us that we have failed all those women. And so, what are you going to say as the president when there is this stark failure on the part of your government and administration? And so it's going to be interesting to hear what the president has to say after hearing what every delegate has to say and raising their concerns. And
government in the last year has been full of self-congratulations because of those 3 bills that were signed into law by the president, which basically deal with the issue of gender-based violence and sexual violence. Is that enough of a measure in terms of the president keeping his commitment to make sure that the women of South Africa feel and are safer in society?
Absolutely not. I mean, they can't pat themselves on the back because of the 3 bills. Law in itself is not a panacea. Does not solve all your problems. So we have said consistently that if you want to address the deficiencies in the criminal justice system, you can't leave out prevention, because it's key in us ridding ourselves of the scourge of gender-based violence. So when you have the 3 bills, and those 3 bills, in fact, as we speak, are not yet in operation, by the way, right? And so they need to tell this summit and account on why those bills are still not operational. And the president has to talk about why is it that he felt compelled and felt necessary to announce to the country that there's 1.6 billion earmarked towards emergency response action plan on gender-based violence. At the moment, no department has been able to account item by item on what they did with that allocation when it was announced. So when we talk accountability, the president can't placate us and come on stage this afternoon and just say, I have asked departments to account, they have failed to account. He must tell us, once they do not account as departments, as different ministries, what action did he take or what action is going to take? Because it seems that there has been failure for ministries and departments to be held accountable.
Based on what you're saying, what is so lacking in terms of the government response and accountability, actually, which is part of the theme today, and the fact that when you look at the crime stats released by police for the April to June quarter, 855 women were among the people murdered in this country. 243 of the murders that also took place in that period were of children. So when can we be able to say these summits are working when women and children are clearly still so vulnerable?
You know, I've said it openly, and we have registered our position on this summit. We are half-hearted in it because we didn't believe that that's the way to demand accountability, and we can't, as a nation, as a country, account by calling people into a big hall through summits and demand accountability. Accountability starts with you being in a position of power and authority, given the responsibility to execute that mandate that you have been given, and account for it while there is inaction. If there is an allegation of no printers at a court and there's no ink for those printers, someone should be held accountable. There should be consequence management. It does not require a summit to do so. So for us, it's why have we come to this point where we think we can account through a summit? And I think that's the bitter taste in my mouth why I am half-hearted in participating in this summit, because I don't think we have done enough to demand accountability, and we think that the summit is going to resolve accountability issues for us when we are not attending to what that accountability should look like in the first place.
You spoke earlier about people and activists on the ground and their experience of the scourge of gender-based violence and attacks on children as well. But when you look at the view of activists and NGOs and what government is presenting and its reflections on the problem, do you get an idea that you're all existing in the same world, all fully aware of the full extent of this emergency?
No, we don't. We don't. And it's the questions that came from the floor this morning tells you all of that we are not singing from the same understanding. We do not get the same information, and we operating in silos. So our work is not coordinated, it's fragmented. And that's the problem, because we're not able to show scale and impact on the work that we are doing, precisely because we pull, the others are pulling this way, the others are pulling that way. So there hasn't been any coordination, and hopefully out of this summit there will be some of seamless process that we're all going to agree to on how we get the scale and the impact that you are looking for.
Right. Just lastly, the Minister for Women and People with Disabilities as well as Children, Madumise-Pajibo, who spoke yesterday, touched on the issue of a grant possibly for women survivors of gender-based violence, which would basically deal with the issue of still uneven economic power in society and how that factors into why many victims of abuse actually stay for long periods or until their death in abusive environments. Given that at the moment is basically a working document and has not been finalized, speak to the urgency of that, in fact, being concluded.
You know, it's well and good to be saying all of these things and there's a document in place. When you have a citizenry that you are not taking along with, right? And that you once you have these documents, you do not find a way to ensure that they have a understanding of what you are trying to achieve. And that's why we are here as a country. It's precisely because we think we have answers for what South Africans need, in particular, how we address gender-based violence and how we ensure that we give the empowerment that is needed so that women are not fully and wholly dependent on their abusers. And by having a document does not address the problem. The problem and the challenge must be addressed by engaging and diagnosing. And I think for me, it's the travesty that we are not diagnosing the problem correctly. We are still not talking about control and power. The control of women's bodies, the control of women's and the power that gives authority to dismiss women's voices. And if you do not bring gender equality at the center when you we're addressing gender-based violence, then we are going to have another summit in 2 years' time.
Brenda, Madumise-Pajibo, good to speak to you, Director at Vows for Africa.